It is around art fight time, and a lot of people are, either making OCs or refurbishing their OCs, and I kind of wanted to make a video explaining some simple steps to develop and make OCs. I will preface this with, like, this is not the only way, or, like, this might even not be the best way, but this is the way that, like, I've found really works for me. Here is my ways to make an actually interesting OC. So, I should say I'm reading off a script on my phone that I made. So, first of all, we have everything has to come from something. Obviously, you are constantly taking inspiration. Everything comes from something. You subconsciously absorb inspiration from your entire life. You want a friendly hero who helps the downtrodden. Okay, do you want Spider Man or Robin Hood? Do you want a poor, unfortunate soul who picks himself up by the bootstraps to help other people? Okay, that's Batman. Okay, that's Superman. Historians and anthropologists have been citing repetitions of stories from the entirety of history. So to say that you're going to make a completely unique story is quite a feat. Is quite a feat. What I find is the best thing to do is just find an archetype or the type or just like a general type of character that you want and then put a unique spin onto it. So for me, the character that I'm drawing now, this is no but I should preface this with that is not the final design. That is not my final design. She's gonna look really different by the end of this. Um, but just like find what type of character you need. For me, I needed a sorceress and a person to juxtapose or like a foil for the other main character of the story, she is very loud and bold personality wise, but she dresses very plainly, and then also she uses more martial weapons. Whereas Sinhal, this character, dresses very decoratively, and then she is incredibly quiet, as well as obviously not using. Okay, I know I'm drawing a staff right now. That is horrible comedic timing, but she does not use a weapon. So, yeah, just finding an archetype and then putting another unique spin onto it. For example, I wanted a character like, for lack of a better word, Gojo. Okay, Gojo's a really bad example of this archetype. Never mind. I mean like a character who is striving for more knowledge or striving for another purpose despite their fears. Um, Whereas like my other character is a very shonen manga character. This character would be more of like more of a Marvel protagonist. And my unique spin on it is that this was a person who at one point thought that she was immortal and then died, physically died, and went to hell, and now has been brought back by essentially the Hindu version of Hades. And she has faced her fear, but the fact that she now knows that she can die is incredibly scary to her. And the fact that she has actually died now only pushes her to be more enveloped in that fear. And I think a lot of her story will be her moving away from that or learning to accept what happened to her. Secondly, so a lot of the time you might already have like a setting in your mind. For example, for me, I am working on a pre-colonial magical India basically. But like I've said, a setting might be Ravenloft or um a Curse of Strahd campaign, or like you're going for a medieval gothic or folk horror, or your setting is Estonia in the 1900s, in the early 1900s, and you can be as specific or as hand wavy as you want it. I'm being pretty hand wavy. I've mixed a lot of influences from a lot of pre-colonial India, so obviously this is not something that you have to stay very strict with, but like where your character is and um the normal fashions of that period will heavily influence, how you design your character. For example, Sikaar is not dressed in full plate armor despite being more of a knight archetype. She is dressed in scale armor because India is incredibly hot and, plate armor was never invented for that reason. Additionally, it's not like these characters are going to show up wearing late 1900s bowler aesthetics from the Americas, you know, unless you can also have a character that on purpose juxtaposes your aesthetic or your setting. For example, Digimon Time Stranger. I don't know, being the singular human in weird human clothing among a bunch of Digimon. The life that these people lead will undeniably influence the way they dress and the way they act. So thinking of what could be happening around that time, or what kind of things were popular around that time, or if you're just making something from scratch completely, then what type of resources they have access to, what type of foods they might have access to, what type of weather facilitates that type of clothing. It's just continuously asking yourself why. For example, we in the Americas, and there was a lot uh, in the late 1900s. Women often adopted shoulder pads to make themselves look more masculine when they were entering into the workforce initially, to have themselves be taken more seriously, and to do that they needed to masculinize themselves. So things like that. Historical precedent, basically. Is there a reason for why something is happening in your story? And if that reason affects your character, how will they be affected by it? Thirdly, this is one of my favorite parts. This is basically where I choose their name, their story, their fears, and basically who they are as a character. Essentially, their backstory. Why they do what they do, and why they are who they are. The circumstances that led them to being who they are, basically. For example, my character, I think that she would be faithful and loyal to the people around her, and she listens to them to a T, basically. Um, for example, her mom's the one who taught her magic, and so in her mother's footsteps, her mother isn't deaf. I don't know why I'm talking about her like she is, but in her mother's footsteps, she follows to gain more knowledge and gain more power over magic. For secondary reason being for her mother, and primary reason being because she's afraid of dying, because she's afraid of death, and because she's afraid of leaving the people close to her without ever achieving her goal, or seeing where they end up. Leaving that type of like story unfinished, basically, is her biggest fear. And that is because of the fact that she has died before and faced the fact that her story ended there, and she wasn't able to say goodbye to her parents and her family and her friends. That this also factors a lot in with the second part of this, with like what things are normal around that time, around your setting. So like, it would be weird in my prehistorical Indian setting for there just to be a person in like with a gun. This is pretty self-explanatory. For example, you could make a mood board, check the fashion of a certain era or country, or even use an animal and adopt that. The inspiration can kind of just be from wherever. This is also a really good time to start working on visual exploration. For example, you see me sketch out like a general body plan here, and then I use that body plan to sketch out multiple different iterations of this character and who I want her to be, and just like pushing different ideas to the extremes, seeing what clicks, what doesn't, seeing what makes sense for the character, what doesn't. For example, character B, her headdress isn't very practical, but it's an idea that I had. For example, here, character B, again, her headdress, not very practical. Her dress, not very reminiscent of the time period or setting that I'm going for. However, I really did like the silhouette of B. So in my final design, which I think is number D here, I decided to keep somewhat of a similar silhouette. Additionally, she takes a lot of inspiration from, or I took a lot of inspiration from old stone carvings, which is one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most factual ways to get reference for periods like these where colonization has wiped out a lot of its history. Just grabbing visual reference from kind of wherever. For example, for her, I referenced Asiatic lions. I referenced funeral attire, which is where we get the white from, and I referenced a lot of Odyssey dancers, which is where I kind of got more of a compact silhouette for her clothing, as well as a, I think on the internet it's been called the Aspara drape, which is the type of drape that I have going on character on the last character to the left here, to the right here. For the final design, I basically took that and then I brushed it up, cleaned what I liked about it and cleaned what I didn't. A lot of her character is based on the fact that she is also a shapeshifter. She is a half Rakshasa, which is why she thought she was immortal, I should say. So taking inspiration from basically wherever. To me, this is kind of the most important for a ongoing story or like story development. What are their, again, what I said, their goals, fears, hopes, and their connections to the rest of the cast. For example, my two characters are childhood friends, and the third character, Yama, Hades, basically, is their boss. What basically just think of what connects your characters to the rest of the cast, why that connects them to the rest of the cast, what led them there, obviously. And then, if there's no other parts of the cast, why is your character a loner? Is that just, do they distance themselves from other people? And why are they a loner? Or, what happened to them to lead them to distance themselves from other people? Again, the process is just brushing away all of these questions to refine basically what is a character. And so I'm going to go over what my character is at the end of all this process. So Sinhal, I've decided that they will go by she and they, and that she is a daughter of a human and a Rakshasa, and she has inherited an impressive Vedya or power and the ability to shapeshift, but with the limit of having to stay humanoid. I should say, I find that pretty interesting when characters are like have a very general power or have like a very, he can fly, he can, shoot lasers out of his eyes, da da da, but he's weak to a magic rock. I like that, like, limits to a character's power. Or like, you trap Superman away from Earth's sun for a while and he's kind of just a person now. Her mother, a powerful Matric, taught her Akasha Vedya, or the power over space and sound. As a Yamaduta, she now works with Sikar, my other character, the martial one, to bring down those who devalue life. So a Yamaduta is, in Hindu mythology, not to say the angels of death, but like, who you see taking you to the afterlife, basically. Usually dressed in white, which is why she's dressed in white. Think of Thanatos if we're making another reference to Greek mythology. If Yama is a Hades-like figure, then Yamadutas are Thanatos. Some character notes for her is that she loves her bangles and that she always wears them, and she follows what her parents say, usually to a T, which is, her mom taught her to value knowledge and seek knowledge, which is why she continues to seek knowledge, even in her adult life after leaving her house. She is powerful, but she is incredibly scared. She has an incredible anxiety towards death and dying and the idea of being hurt again, basically, which I thought was a very funny premise for an angel of death, basically. Her story in general would be from a young age, Sika, the other character, moved in with her family, and all of a sudden, her parents had to pay attention to this new kid in the house because Sika's parents died. And, these are her foster parents. They want to make sure that she's comfortable. And the beginning of her story starts that in order to gain what she thought was her mother's favor back, obviously you're gonna have, as a parent, you need to put more focus on the child that needs it. But, Sinha, that she was being punished as a child, so to gain favor with from her mother, she started researching magic at a very young age, on her own. And basically, when she started showing that she was incredibly adept and natural at it, her mother took her under her tutelage to teach her one of the five elemental magics, Akasha Vedya, which is space and sound, like I've said. I think that her power set would literally just be telekinesis of a sort, basically. Not to be like, not like teleportation or anything, but like I think legitimately just telekinesis. Maybe she gains more powers later, but like for now, that's where I think the limit would be. And then her and Sika grow closer and closer as children. And then, one day they were out playing pretty far from the village, and they both fall. They fall into a cavern, and as children, they die. That cavern, however, is a now defunct temple to Yama, and them dying on his basically his front doorstep, and the fact that they didn't lead a very long life, and they both had so much potential, means that he essentially offered them a deal. Their lives back until their 18th birthdays, when they will then serve as his Yamadutas. And then the story will basically just follow those two serving the god of the dead, and, hijinks ensue. My throat really hurts. I've been talking for 30 minutes straight now. Yeah, if you haven't seen the first video in this series, I'll link the playlist somewhere. And then, yeah, um, follow me on Art Fights. Follow me on Art Fight. Follow me on Art Fight. Please comment, like, subscribe, all the YouTube things. Tell me what movie you are looking forward to, and if you've watched any cool movies recently. Have a happy Art Fight. Have a happy June. Happy Pride. I'm really tired, guys. Good night. Goodbye.